Roots are important to families. Knowing where you come from and passing down stories and traditions should be preserved. I'm Emily Jones Hudson, and in this upcoming series, we will explore how families hand down important information to their children and even to their children's children. Join us for generation to generation, passing down family history, tradition, and stories.
Hello, my name is Jade Neace. I am from Lots Creek, Kentucky. I am 23 years old and I have been crocheting for nearly 14 years. I started crochet because of my grandmother when I was in Girl Scouts. I very badly wanted to get the crochet badge because I knew that my Nina knew how to crochet. So she sat me down and tried to teach me and was so good and so fast that I couldn't see what she was doing. She would slowly make one chain and then the next, and suddenly she'd have a whole row of stitches, and I'd say, "When'd you turn around?" And she'd say, "Well, I did this and this." And she was just so good at it, she couldn't explain what she was doing. She'd been doing it near 50 years. So she helped me get the badge, and a few years after that, I sat down and I said, I want to know how to do this. And I tried getting her to teach me again, and at that point, she had brain cancer, and so her memory was going and she couldn't remember how to crochet a lot of the time. So I sat down, opened up a YouTube video. It was actually at a sleepover, and me and two other girls all got yarn and some hooks and opened up a YouTube video on how to make a hat. And come 4 a.m, I was the one who finished their hat. And I said, this is great. I love doing this. So I started teaching myself, and it's completely spiraled from there. It's part of my personality. I was known in college as the crochet girl. I'm really passionate about making toys for little kids because I think if little kids see it, they'll want to learn it, and then hopefully crochet will keep going. It's not very common anymore, but I can very proudly say that during college I taught 3 separate classes, and I got roughly 10 different people into doing it, more than just for that class. It's something I'm very concerned about with traditional crafts like quilting, like crochet, like knitting, going out of fashion. And so any opportunity that I have, I try to teach it and I try to get someone interested in it. So because of that, I focus a lot of my effort onto toys because little kids are going to be our next generation. And I design a lot of my patterns because while there's so many really good resources online for free that you can learn from and you can crochet, I don't think it's right if I sell patterns that someone else put the time and effort into. I no disrespect to anyone who does so. If I'm requested specifically to use a pattern, then I don't mind to. But I don't think it's right if I'm going out and saying, oh, I made this completely from scratch, when no, I didn't make the pattern. So I sit down and make all of my own patterns. I taught myself pattern making alongside the crochet in the beginning, so it's very natural to me. And I'm always willing to share my own patterns too, because I think accessibility is something that'll only help get more people into it. I think kids love the idea of making things for their own selves, especially in this day and age where so many kids are always online all the time, that getting them something physical that they can make and they can get a product out of and see something at the end and say, I made this. I find a lot of kids are super interested in that, especially around the age of 7 to 12. Oh my gosh, you can't get them to stop once you get them started. I partnered with Chris Campbell at the Boys and Girls Club, and we did a tester crochet class right before Christmas, and we were only expecting like 5 kids maybe, all of them above the age of 10. Instead, somehow word got around and we had 25 show up, the youngest of which was 3, the oldest of which was 16. And so because of that, sadly, the class didn't end up making anything just because it was too hectic. We weren't prepared for it. But after the fact, I had about 4 different kids, including one little boy about 7, I think is how old he was, come up to me afterwards and say, Miss Jade, are you going to come back? Will you please come back and teach us? We really want to learn. And it touched my heart so big for that, because it's like, even if they failed, they didn't manage to get a single stitch with the whole group. But they tried for an hour. And afterwards they said, I'm still very determined to do it. It made my heart feel so big to have that. My daddy was a teacher for almost 30 full years. He taught English and theater at the high school. And because of that, education and learning is so important to me. I took part in so many tutoring groups because my classmates were struggling or they didn't find learning interesting. And I love finding ways to make learning interesting. So for something like crochet, that's another reason why I think I love doing toys so much, because it appeals so much more to people than a washcloth does. Yeah, a washcloth's super useful and it's great to begin with, but it's just a square. People don't like learning just a square. So I love finding ways to make learning fun, and especially if it's a good skill that they can keep all of their life and keep practicing. It's so, so important to me.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about your grandmother. What was her name? And how do you think she learned how to crochet? Where did she get that from?
So my Nina was from Allays here in Hazard. And she learned from her mother and her grandmother, too. This is something that's been passed down for so many generations in our family specifically. I don't know where they ended up at, because my aunts took some of her items after her passing. But she did, when she was still alive, have some blankets that were from her grandmother still. And I hope that they're still around.
What were their names?
So my grandmother's name was Norma Jean Keith. She married Clayton Bryant. Her mother's name was Lavinia Toller, and she married Robert Keith. And I have the family book in my room, but I can't remember her mother's name off the top of my head. I'm not the one who researches our family genealogy, but one of my cousins has us traced all the way back to Ireland, and the first people who came to Ireland, and then even further beyond that. But from my own memory, it was Lavinia Toller's mother who also knew how to crochet, and she taught her daughter. Lavinia taught my Nina, Norma. And then Lavinia also taught my mother. My Nina didn't teach my mother, who's Heather Bryant, and now Heather Neace. But so it became a very much pattern in our family of grandmothers teaching granddaughters. So that's why it was so important to me that Nina taught me. And I'll say she taught me, even though I really didn't learn much from her.
She planted the seeds, though.
She did, very much. She's the reason why I thought it was so interesting. But I do think I'm the first one in our family to do plushies like this, toys and everything. Blankets, sweaters, everything like that were super big. But I don't think anyone, at least that we know of, made toys and the like.
Okay, all right. So you're going to demonstrate.
Yes, ma'am. So before I start, I will show off a little bit. This is my pattern making notebook. So I have had this since my sophomore year of high school. And this is where, when I started making patterns, I found this notebook, started writing them down. So they're very neat at the beginning. And this octopus pattern is the first one I ever made. I learned how to do plushies and toys in multiples of 6. So it's very easy to remember how to do. And of course they're still very neat up until a point, and then you can see where I pattern test and tell me how to hold it so it's in the frame. But it's very visible that I love pattern testing. I love figuring things out. And making mistakes is all part of the process. It's a very necessary thing in my opinion. So this is the most recent pattern that I made. I designed a granny square in the shape of the bat signal from Batman, and with the intention to turn it into a purse. And I do plan on one day making a website or something to post these on, just for the sake of accessibility. But right now, if someone asks me, can I have that pattern that you made? Absolutely, I'll write it down for you. Here you go. But today I will be demonstrating how to make a small version of a chicken. When I crochet, I do it in the round most of the time, and I start with what's called a magic ring. This one specifically, English tutorials made no sense to me. The only tutorial that ever made sense to me was a Iranian woman on YouTube. There were no English subtitles. She didn't speak a lick of English, but she explained it and did it slowly enough that it made perfect sense to me, and that's how I've done it ever since. So I take the yarn and I wrap it around my thumb twice and then pinch it in between my two fingers so that there's good tension. And I'll take my hook and slide it underneath that first loop and grab the second one and pull it through. And then I'll grab what's in between my fingers again, pull it through, and that makes a very strong knot. And I don't know if you can tell, but I very easily fall into teaching mode with it as well. And that's just because I did it so much during college, and I love doing it now that I take after my daddy a lot when it comes to teaching. So for a chicken, I work on multiples of 5 because it makes the roundness of the body end up coming up in such a way that I can do a little zipper up the back, and that makes it look like the chicken has a little tail and a little butt, which I think is a very fun thing. So I'll do 5 stitches into my magic ring. And I personally use a very small hook for my yarn size. I think it makes the tension a little bit nicer, neater. So I use a 3.5 millimeter. I used to use 3.25 and got talked out of it because it was too small to work with. And now that I have 5 stitches, I'll just go in and do 2 into each of those for a total of 10 in the round. I don't join with a slip stitch, even though it makes it a little bit neater. It doesn't spiral quite as bad. I don't enjoy doing a slip stitch because then you end up with a very clear seam of where you're working up and up and up. I like the more natural working in the round. And I do talk while I crochet, which means I do have so many numbers in my head while I do this. I used to get made fun of in high school actually for it because I would crochet at lunch, and they would say, "Jade, how are you having this conversation right now? Like, you're explaining to us how to do this in chemistry, but you're doing this. Aren't you supposed to be counting that?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm on stitch 128 right now. Don't call me out." And that's just something I've kept up for a very long time. I crocheted during college classes because it helped me pay attention a lot better. And that was something, first day of class, I wouldn't take anything with me. And I would approach the professor after class and say, "Hi, I don't do very well with taking notes. My brain can't pay attention because I get too caught up in writing the words I hear instead of hearing the words I hear. So, do you mind if I work with my hands? I promise it'll be small projects. It won't be very obtrusive to your class." I only ever had one professor say no, and it wasn't a true no. It was during COVID and taking classes online through Skype and Zoom. She said, "Just don't have it on camera and you're fine." And that's how I remembered. I would remember what I was working on while having those classes. And again, my friends loved to poke fun at me and be like, when I was selling stuff, they would hold up something I made and say, "And this stitch was made while learning about the Civil War." And one time a friend did that to me, and he'd gotten on my nerves earlier in the day, and I picked it up and said, "Actually, I made this one while we were looking at Athenian archaeology. I can tell you what specifically we were talking about." And he looked at me and said, "You're so crazy." But that's just how my brain works, and I think doing something like this really helps your brain power too. Because it's not so much multitasking as you just learn how to handle so many different inputs. And for me, it just helps me focus a lot better. So I have continued going. I've done my 10 in the round, and now I'm going to increase by 5. So on multiples of 3. So because we started with 5, we're going from 10 to 15. So I'll do 1 and then 2, 3 in the same. And that's how I'll do my increases. And that's a very good way to stay in the round. So I've done my 15, and as you can see, it is very, very small. You will still have that very massive tail from when you started. Don't worry about it because it'll just stay there. It'll be hidden because when we close this up, it'll be a little ball and you'll fill it with stuffing. And no one will ever know there was a long, loose piece of crochet in there. So we did our 15. We're going to increase now on 4s. So we'll do 1, 2, and then 3 and 4 in the same one. And that'll get us up to 20 in the round. A lot of people kind of said, why don't you turn it into a business? Why don't you turn it into a business? Because a business comes with having stock and making sure you're meeting demands. And to me, this isn't just a hobby, but it's also not something I want to make myself super stressed out about. If I do that, then I'm not going to enjoy it anymore. And to me, it's so important to enjoy what you're doing. So even though now I work at the toy store on Main Street of Hazard, I love it. My boss is very good to me. He lets me sell my crochet there. And I love it because now even more little kids are getting exposed to it because they're seeing it and they're wanting it and they're saying, I want to know how to do this. But I don't consider that a business selling because there's no pressure on me to have a stock. It's still in a method of just as I make it, I have it available. And so that's why I'm really glad to be doing it in that method. I don't want it to become a very stressful thing. Okay. So now I have gotten my increasing on the 4th. We're at 20 stitches in the round. And now we're going to take it up to 25. And this one isn't a super long pattern. It's going to make just something about that tall. So I figured that would be good for the demonstration if you wanted me to carry it through the whole thing. But we've got our 20. We're going to go up to 25 now. So 1 and 1, 2 in the second, 3 in the third, and then 4 and 5 will be in the 4th stitch. But of course, I'm still going to talk about college. I do miss my college days now that I've been graduated for 2 years. But it very much made me so excited to see how many people loved it. And of course, I did this through all my 4 years, but in my junior year, the head of our DEI department reached out to me. She was Dr. Deidre Denny. Love this woman to death. I love her so much. She reached out to me and said, hey, do you know of a lot of other people that do crafts like you do? And I said, I know a few. She said, what would you think of making a market? And so that completely spiraled to now Transylvania University holds a yearly student market, all student or alumni vendors, and it can be as little as you painted a canvas and now you have it to sell, all the way to we have some students who started their own business with protein powder and such like that. And it's very, very impressive. And so it's held on the last Friday before finals week, every fall semester. So it usually falls on December 5th. And that I think of as my legacy, and it makes me very pleased to know that that's something I helped get started because I crocheted in public, is how I see it. And I didn't only do it in class, I also did it on the bench. I would work with a big skeiny yarn and I'd stick it on my arm, just shove my hand through the yarn, and I'd go on walks for about 30 minutes at a time and just go crocheting while walking around campus. And it just got so many people aware of crochet that I really think it, even if people don't learn to crochet from it, they know that crochet's a thing. They know the difference of it between crochet and knitting. So many people don't know the difference, but I like to think that I taught many people the difference. Okay. The great thing about crocheting in the round as well, when you're working on the multiples, is if you get distracted and you just keep talking, you're not actually counting, you can always count to see, oh, have I done this increase yet? So right now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th stitch is the increase, which means, okay, we're on the next one because that'll be 5 and 6 in the same one. So we've got 25 done. We're going to move up to 30. Another great thing about selling on my campus and selling around here is that you know that your work is in someone's office, is in someone's home. My favorites were the head of student well-being, who was my boss my senior year because I did work study as well. So I was being a student and working and crocheting all at the same time. And she bought one of everything I ever made, I think. She was the most supportive person. Her name's Ashley Hill. And she got a big old velvet blanket from me, one octopus of every color, plus probably 8 different custom ones, a whole set of chickens plus a basket, and just so much more. She even got me to make a dinosaur pattern for her son who loves dinosaurs, and not in a Jurassic Park, ooh, that's a dinosaur. That baby has been reading encyclopedias since he was 2. And so I had to research and make a very accurate stegosaurus for this youngin'. And it's one of the joys of me to know that, like, he still plays with that toy. She'll text me sometimes pictures of him. And her office is still just covered in the things that I've made. And it just tickles me so much because the reach of when you're doing this stuff, if you're giving it away, if you're selling it, you are touching so many people's lives. So we've got 30 now. Instead of continuing to increase, we've got a good shape for the butt of the chicken to be able to sit down. So we will do 30 more, and we'll do that 3 times, so a total of 90. And because of how visible the increases are, you don't truly have to count. You just have to be able to line it up with your last increase. And that's a good thing about crocheting like this, is give yourself visual markers. You can absolutely use stitch markers, which are little round plastic things that you can slide into the stitch. Absolutely, if that helps you do it. I don't like it. I can't stand doing it. I would rather count or just line it up. But absolutely, you can also, if you don't have a fancy stitch marker, you're just starting, take a scrap piece of yarn that's in a different color, stick it in there, crochet around it, boom. And you can just pull it out when you're done. That's the good thing. You don't need a whole lot of fancy supplies for it. And that's my favorite thing. You need a hook. It can be metal, it can be wood, it can be ergonomic, it can be just flat. Anything that works for you, it works. I had one classmate in college who was born with only one hand and had a stump of a hand, of an arm right here. And they still crochet. They made a wooden block that had a hole at the end of it that they could adjust a vice grip on. And so they could slide their crochet hook onto it and mount the block onto their table. And so they could wrap the yarn around it with one hand and just move the piece while the hook stayed completely still. And they made whole scarves very quickly, might I add. So crochet is as accessible as you want it to be, because especially, like I keep saying, it's accessibility. It's always been so important to me, but it's more important now. This probably doesn't help to it, but I have rheumatoid arthritis, and it's especially concentrated into my hands and into my knees. I'll joke all the time I can feel weather coming in because my knees start hurting real bad. But my friends joke a lot. Oh, you're a granny. You crochet and you have arthritis. But because of this, even more so, I am so about the accessibility of things. I had to reteach myself crocheting because when I learned, I started doing it while holding the hook like a pencil, like this. And I didn't know what damage I was doing until I went to the doctor with my dad, and she looked at us and said, "How do both of you have carpal tunnel?" So I retaught myself how to crochet, and now I hold it flat ways, which is the same way my great-grandmother held her hook. She had very bad arthritis, not rheumatoid, just arthritis. And her hand was stuck in this position for decades. And so she would slide her hook right here and grab it like this, and she'd make a blanket in a week. So I hope my hand doesn't get to that point, but it's another thing that I'm proud of, that not only do I have the same illness, I have the same hobby as my great-grandmother. And so even though I never met her, she passed away when my mom was young. It makes me so happy to have that connection to her. Okay, so we've got our 3 rounds of 30. So next we're going to start bringing it in and decreasing. And to keep it in that same great round shape, I also still decrease on those multiples too. So just like we last increased on 6, we're going to decrease on 6. And I do what's called an invisible decrease. So where there's the loops, instead of going underneath both of them, I'll go under one of the first and the one of the second, and then I'll grab it and pull it through. But I'll do that again, 1 and 1, 2 and 2, 3 and 3, 4 and 4, and then I'll do grab the first of 5, grab the first of 6, and pull those together. And that way it'll bring 30 back down to 25. There really isn't a time where I can remember that crochet hasn't been a part of my life, even when I was very, very young. Like I said, my great-grandmother taught my mother. And my mother didn't teach me because, as she admits herself, she crochets a washcloth, and that's the extent. I've offered to get her into more, teach her bigger things, a blanket, work on it with her, and she said, nope, I'll just keep making our washcloths. And she does very good at them, but when I was little, I was like, no, these can be so much more than a washcloth. I played with a lot of Barbies when I was a kid because my other grandmother, who's Wanda Morgan, she got me a lot of Barbies with the intent that I would sell them one day and that would be my college fund. And so that didn't happen. As a kid, instead, that was my reward of if I got an especially good grade on a test or I kept all A's for the entire year, then I would get to open one. And so when I had those Barbies, my mom would be crocheting and making washcloths, so I would beg her to give me one. Give me a pink one, please. Make one in pink just for me, please, please, please. And with the grandmother that taught me how to crochet, she had gotten me a little bed for the dolls. So I had this bed, and so I begged and begged for a washcloth, and I turned that into the blanket. And so my favorite thing was I always put my dolls to sleep. And I probably had 5 or 6 washcloths dedicated to just being doll blankets. So, and that's been one of my earliest memories too. I can't remember a time without it, truthfully. So, because of how chickens are shaped and because I based it off of my original chicken pattern to make the tiny ones, I don't want it to come up way too quickly. So instead of doing another round of decreases after we got it back down to 25, instead I'll do just a straight round of 25. And that way, instead of just coming in and making kind of a flat top, it'll slowly start to inch upwards. Okay, so I've done that round of 25. So we're going to do another decrease round to keep pulling it back in. And this will be the last decrease round. It'll bring us down to 20. And then after that, we'll start working in a very odd pattern. Instead of working continuously in the round repeating, we're going to work in a very odd pattern, and that's going to bring the sides in and help make the butt while also keeping the front to be able to form the head of the chicken. So I've gotten my last decrease and it's formed a very nice little pouch, so we will go ahead and put some stuffing in it. And I just use plain and simple doll stuffing, same thing that you'll find in most dog toys. Polyfill, you can very easily get it at Walmart. And I like to overstuff my work, so that way it's got a lot of squish to it. So I'll just shove some right in there. And then we will be working in a very odd way. So instead of working in the round continuously repeating till we get to the end, we're going to separate it into 5 little sections. So section 1 is going to be the side. 2 and 3 are going to be the chest and the face of the chicken. 4 is the other side, and then 5 is the butt of the chicken. And that's very specific, so that way the chicken's butt is going to come up to a peak, so it'll look like it has a little tail, while the face is going to come up and have a little head. And because we're doing the mini chicken, it won't have eyes so much. But so for the first side, we're going to just do 5. No increases or decreases on that one. For the first half of the face, we want it to start kind of drawing in at the back of the neck. So we're going to start with a decrease. and then do 3 more. Each section is 5 stitches because it starts out very even. I actually think I misread my pattern. I misread my own pattern. I wasn't supposed to do the last round of decreases. And that is very easy to do. It's a great opportunity to see the best part of messing up in crochet is frogging. And my favorite kind of dad joke to say is, why is it called frogging in crochet when you have to pull out your stitches? Because you rip it. And it's perfectly okay to mess up. Everyone does. So we'll just go back to when we had those 25 stitches. And now we're going to go in that pattern. So we're going to do 5 for the first side. And on the second half of the face, we're going to mirror that and do 3 and then decrease. And then the other side we'll also just do 5. And then for the back, we want it to start drawing up really tight. So we'll do a decrease, put one plain in the middle, and then do another decrease. Okay, since that's decreased us in such a way, instead of doing 5 down the sides, we'll do 4 down this first one, and that's just gonna slightly tilt us, but it won't be noticeable after the fact. And we'll once again keep shrugging those shoulders up, so we'll do a decrease. And 2 more. And then again, we'll mirror that and do 2 and then our decrease. So, like I said, it's going to be a little off center. That's okay. So we're going to do 5 on the opposite side. And then to keep pulling that tail up, we're going to do 2 decreases. There we go. So now we're starting to kind of pull together. You can see the top coming together. So what we'll do is we'll slip stitch across that side. So we'll slip stitch 4, and then we'll do single crochets in those 2 parts that are the face. We'll slip stitch that side again, and then we'll do single crochets up here on the tail, so that way it starts pulling up and looks like a tail. So we'll do 4. And I try really hard to explain as I'm crocheting the same way that I learned from YouTube videos, just because it made so much sense. That's why I'll repeat things so much. I'll explain things in such a certain way. So slip stitches, now we'll do single crochet for 7. And that's just because where I learned from YouTube, it's not that I've picked up a language so much, but there is a language of how to explain for video. It's also just because that made so much sense when I was learning, I tried to explain it in the same way in the hopes that it makes sense for someone else while learning. Okay, now we'll slip stitch 5. And 2 singles in the back. And what I'll do is I'll add just a tiny bit more stuffing. And again, that's just because I really like to overstuff my work to give it a lot of squish. And we'll slip stitch up the back. So we'll ignore the 2 single crochet that we did. We'll go into that first slip stitch, and then we'll reach across and go into the second slip stitch on the first slip stitch on the opposite side. And we'll pull through both of those, and that's how I kind of zipper the back up. And it draws it up so that way the tail starts to poke up. We'll do that all the way. And this is when, if you're working with very tight tension, it actually gets a little harder, because it's very hard to go back underneath very tight slip stitches. But we've got the back all pulled together. And now we're gonna just form the head, and because it's the tiny chicken, it's not gonna get any eyeballs. So we're just gonna do single crochets around. And when it gets to the back, you'll just have to reach across and pull the tension tight there. And that way there'll be a tiny little hole at the back of the neck, but that's okay. And there we go. That's the base of the chicken. And here's where you would stuff it a little more, and then you'll tie off, you'll cut your yarn, you'll sew it up a little bit, and then if you want to, you can absolutely add a little beak with some yellow yarn and embroider it, and you can add a little crest like what I've got on here. But that is the base of a tiny chicken.
All right. That's a great demonstration.
Thank you.
Great demonstration. Now, to conclude,
Yes.
Is there anything you would speak to this generation coming up about the crafting and the tradition and so forth?
Work with your hands. We're all so focused on technology, and that's fair. There's a lot of technology in our lives right now, but find something to work with your hands. If you've got someone in your family, an uncle, a grandparent, ask them to teach you. If you don't have any crafts in your family, find someone. If you talk to an old man at the coffee shop and he says he does woodworking, ask him, will you teach me sometime? If you run into a 20-something-year-old girl at the library and she's crocheting, do you do classes? Now find some way to work with your hands. Teach yourself if you must, but find something to get you away from the screens and back into making.